Okay, today we're going to finish up this semester with this video dealing with two important cases of employer issues. And employer issues are some of the most important problems that you will deal with as an educational leader. These cases are somewhat complicated, especially the first one, the case of Luke versus Louisiana State School for the Deaf. I want to talk about it a little bit and just hope you can understand the complexity involved in hiring and firing employees. So this case involves a teacher and a coach that worked at this school for the deaf for over 20 years, and he had been approached by the director of the extended year program that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, to teach for a period of I think 16 days, and he was supposed to teach a student that had not been very reliable in terms of attendance. But the director of the program said, if you'll teach this, we're going to guarantee a certain amount of money that you will earn, even if this kid only shows up one day. So the teacher said, okay, I've got a commitment on the 1st of August to take a trip with my family, but I'll do this for you. I think it'll help you, and it'll certainly help me with some extra money during the summer. So they signed what was called a statement of understanding, and the superintendent of the district also signed it. And so there was an agreement that this teacher would perform his teaching services for a specific amount of time. Well, the kid only showed up 2 days. But the teacher expected that he would be able to work, and perhaps in some other capacity, until the end of their agreement. But shortly thereafter, the superintendent called him in and said, we don't need your services. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Well, obviously, there was a dispute over that, and the teacher became very upset that he was not going to be able to earn the money that he had counted on. And I know as a teacher who worked in the summer, and perhaps some of you do the same thing, you count on that money to live a lot of times. So he was very disappointed. And as you can imagine, he lawyered up. And when he did, the superintendent had a little change of heart, said, all right, we'll find a few other things for you to do, but it was not nearly enough. So the teacher then filed suit. And hearings were held, and the decision of the court was that, there is a contract here, that the school district did enter into a contract, and the school district owes this teacher the amount of money that they had agreed upon. Well, the money was coming from the Department of Education, and the Department of Education said, no, we don't owe him that money. So the Superior Court decision was appealed to the appeals court, and the appeals court agreed with the Superior Court and said, yes, you do. This was a contract. And in the decision of the court, description of contracts were made, and it seemed to be very clear that not only was the decision to pay the teacher made, but also decision to pay attorney's fees. And oftentimes attorney's fees become a real bone of contention in terms of if a suit is won and if it's lost, who's going to pay us attorney's fees. Typically the winner of the suit also gets attorney's fees. The loser has to pay their own attorney's fees. So that becomes a substantial amount of money. So the important thing, I think, to remember out of this case, I want you to read it carefully, and I want you to pay close attention to the short-term contract that was issued here. and the importance of promising somebody some work. If you promise someone some work in the school business, in the public sector, you need to be able to follow through. Because if you don't, eventually you will pay not only the wages that were owed, but in many times extra court fees, costs, and attorney fees. So that's a very important case to remember. Take a look at it. Pretty interesting read. Now, the other case. This case doesn't deal with K-12 governance, but it's a topic that I think is important because it does deal with teacher behavior, and in this particular case, a definition of immorality. Now, as you read this case, the Board of Trustees of Compton Junior College District versus Stubblefield, you'll see that Stubblefield is not a very endearing person to me as an educator. When you read what happened here, the guy needed firing, deserved firing, but then he brings suit against the court and wants to have his job restored because he said that what he did had nothing to do with his ability to teach. Now, this was back in 1971. Times were very different in those days. Standards are different, interpretation is different, ethical behavior is considered to be different. But when you read this case, you won't think so when you see the behavior, or read about the behavior of Stubblefield. He deserved firing if anybody did. But what I want you to take away from this is the fact that when school boards and principals make recommendations to fire employees, that it cannot be arbitrary, that the decisions have to be based upon fact, have to be based upon testimony, and this term called immorality is a very, very hard term to prove when you go to court. So I think you'll see that when you read the decision. So one of the things that I think is important when you read this case is that the court clearly states upon the limitations of three groups of people in terms of their conduct. School teachers are one. There is an expectation that school teachers will behave themselves. The decision also lists policemen and judges. So three categories there upon which school folks are expected to behave in a higher ethical manner than most other folks. And of course, Stubblefield did not. You'll see that when you read the case. It's very interesting. So once again, as we finish the semester, I think employee issues, particularly dealing with cases involving moral turpitude and morality, I think we'll have lots of good discussion as to what your responsibilities will be in terms of being a school leader. So I look forward to hearing from you on these cases.